First, I have Jerry Heneghan, who is a professor of the practice and director of Center for Innovations in Pharmacy Simulation at the UNC Eshleman School of Pharmacy. He leads the center in the development of simulation tools to enhance all phases of education and pharmaceutical research, including medication discovery, delivery optimization, assessment, and practice. Prior to joining UNC, he was a principal investigator for the BioGears human physiology engine, was director for human sim product development, was a co-founder and CEO of Virtual Heroes, served as an executive producer for the America's Army game project. He also worked at the Research Triangle Institute, Tom Clancy's Red Storm Entertainment, and Interactive Magic, and served as a U.S. Army AH-64 helicopter pilot in assignments all over the world. Mr. Heneghan earned his MBA from Fuqua School of Business at Duke University and BS in Engineering from the U.S. Military Academy. Dr. Robert Hubal is a research associate professor in the UNC Eshleman School of Pharmacy. His research interests center on the intelligent use of technology to better train and access knowledge and skills. He has experience investigating the cost-effectiveness of simulations, conducting expertise in mental modeling, studies, and developing training to address interpersonal skills. He has applied research results to such everyday and specialized domains as medical informed consent and ethical judgment, clinical assessment of social and relational skills, consumer decision-making, police consumer communication, and survey non-response. Prior to joining UNC, he worked as a lead scientist at Soar Tech, an artificial intelligence company, and a senior research in the Center for Distributed Learning and the Substance Abuse Epidemiology and Military Behavioral Health Program at RTI International. Dr. Hubal holds a PhD from Duke University in Cognitive Psychology and an MS from North Carolina State University in Computer Sciences. With no more time wasted, I would like to introduce both Jerry Heneghan and Dr. Hubal.
Bad knees.
I'm Jerry. This is Rob. Thank you for having us. We work for Dean Bob Bluen. Anybody know Bob Bluen up at UNC? Great guy, very down to earth. He's the reason why we're there. So, do you want to fire this beastie up here? Have you drive and I'll talk here. So we're going to give you a little bit of presentation about our virtual patient project. So Dean Bluen recruited us probably about 18 months ago to start something called a Center for Innovation in Pharmacy Simulation. And so in addition to what we're going to talk about today, we create videos for instructors, iBooks, websites, more traditional kind of e-learning content. Rob and I have a background in simulation and game development, and that's how we got there. About 10 years ago, my wife and I had a company called Virtual Heroes, and we were doing a lot of work for the military. And Dean Bluen came to visit us, and through that interaction, we stayed in touch with him. And a few years ago, I had the good fortune to be the principal investigator for the government's biomathematical representation of a human being called the BioGears engine. I'm going to show that to you today. And so I subbed a lot of the pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic drug models to the UNC School of Pharmacy, and that's how we got reconnected. Around the same time, Dr. Eshelman donated a substantial tranche of funding to the school. The last one was $100 million, and so that created opportunities for innovation across a number of disciplines, and ours was chosen to be one of them. So we're here to talk about three things today: what we're doing with virtual patients and why that might be of interest to you. We want to talk about what it is that we're doing and how that's different than other virtual patient initiatives out there. And we also want to reach out to you and enlist your potential support as collaborators, colleagues, subject matter experts to help us to create more content as we build out this platform. So the first thing we're going to do is show a quick video here. Okay. There we go. Show you what this thing looks like. Okay, so our dean likes to use the metaphor, he's from hockey territory up in Boston, that what we're doing is creating quality shots on goal here, right? It's the Malcolm Gladwell idea that if you spend enough hours doing something, you become an expert. And so we've had a lot of discussions at the School of Pharmacy regarding, how many students interact with real patients and how many patients do they get to interact with through the course of a 47-month PharmD program. That number is somewhere around 50 to 60 patients. And we thought, well, gosh, what if that number was, 300 or 400, and a lot of those were simulated. So we do a lot of the same things that you do. Our students work with our cohort across the street at the School of Nursing, the School of Medicine, and they work on mannequins for interprofessional education. We also have the ability to run them through standardized patient training in our buildings. We have, I think, 16 suites set up to do that. And this was just something new because we wanted things that were scalable, standardized, cost-effective. The first versions of what we're building out is single-user, self-paced instruction, but the technology that we're using certainly has the capacity to go multiplayer, as they say in the game world, or multi-user for up to large numbers of people. So for any gamers out there, anybody that's played games or their kids play games, okay, we got one out there. So we use the Unreal Engine, Unreal 4 engine from Epic Games. Epic Games is right down the street from us in North Carolina. So, the whole purpose of this is to really demonstrate the skills that students should have in a safe, non-threatening synthetic environment before they go across the street to the clinics or to work with their preceptors in clinical pharmacies to see those first patients. We get a lot of anecdotal feedback from preceptors about, gosh, coulda, woulda, shoulda, would have been nice if the students were familiar with this or that. And so we're going to be training that in these scenarios. In terms of the educational objectives, what's interesting about this is we're not just looking at the patients, these virtual patients, in an acute kind of one-shot kind of way. Most of the medical simulations I've worked on are related to things like emergency medicine, anesthesiology, things like that, where you see patients, in one context. And we really wanted to take advantage of the technology, and so we're creating patients that the students will see throughout their lifetimes. So you're going to see them when they're a young adult, you're going to see them when they're in their middle age, all the way up to when they're a geriatric patient. And we program some of these variables in here. You see some of them here: genetics, genotype, phenotype, disease progression. We're going to give variability to the patients, whether they're adherent or not to their protocols that are given to them by the pharmacy students. And that's all programmed through artificial intelligence in the game. We're also going to have a variety of different environments, whether it's the environments that we're familiar with here. We also send our students to other countries, especially between the third and fourth year. They go to places like Haiti, Uganda, Tanzania, Liberia, Malawi, places like that. And so we want to create simulated experiences where culturally and contextually things are perhaps less structured than they're familiar with. Bottom bullet there, really it's all about predicting patient outcomes and understanding that this is a lifetime experience for these patients in terms of the protocols that you put them on. People ask, well, gosh, what can I do in this thing, this game or this simulation? Well, we're creating a 3D world. You saw a little bit of that in that very incredibly brief video. So you can interact with objects, you can talk to people. We have natural language processing embedded in the software. Rob's going to talk about that a little bit. We've built electronic healthcare records that you can call up. You can also call for tests on the virtual patients. You'll get test results back. You can order lab results, and then basically you create a therapy plan, present your findings, and then remediate, repeat as you go through the life cycle of the patient. And because of the branching that's in the game, there's a lot of variability, a lot of replayability in terms of you could go through this 15 or 20 times and it may not be the same thing every time you go through. So this is what it looks like. This is actually a rendering of our cancer hospital at University of North Carolina. We've put a lot of realistic environments in here, treatment rooms, emergency rooms, things like that. So we've created virtual pharmacy, counseling rooms. These are all photorealistic. This is the level of fidelity we're going for. That's not a real person. It's not my Uncle Bubba. That's a completely computer-generated character. And so we're trying to create suspension of disbelief. And what I wanted to show you there was that underneath each patient, what's very unique about what we're doing is there's a very complex physiology engine. So it's called BioGearsEngine.com. And it's open source. The government's invested probably about $12 million in the project right now. I want to show it to you. Can we jump out to So this is BioGears. This is one of several engines that are running underneath the hood of this character. So when you look at most virtual patients, they're, like polygonal, plastic, cartoony, like puppets, basically. What we're creating here is the equivalent of a flight simulator. So in flight simulators, you have complex mathematical models underneath what you see as the airplane. In this case, the airplane is represented by the patient, and then these are some of the models. So, once again, this engine is open source. You can download it. It's very well documented. It's being used. We've got thousands of downloads of this. And so it's hard to see on these monitors. It's kind of small. But this particular scenario, there's about 1 million points of data in here. And this is running through about a 15 or 20 minute scenario that we built for the Army a few years ago for traumatic amputation and a multi-wound situation, also with compromised airway. And so you can change the scale of this. You can administer drugs. In the virtual patient that we're building, a student could walk into a treatment room, basically give a drug or several to a patient, expose the waveforms of the physiology in real time, watch what happens, learn about the interaction of those drugs. You can actually speed up the time, you can slow it down. So this is what's running underneath the hood of the engine. Let's see. And then we've got, this is like all the things that would happen in that scenario in terms of all the actions and interactions with the patient that would happen. So anyway, you get the idea. These are some of the people that are using it. University of Minnesota, University of Washington, a bunch of simulation companies. And this is the government's standard for biomathematical models. We also worked with Grace Pang at the National Center for Biomedical Engineering at the NIH to create this as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
I'm all set. So Jerry talked about the fact that what we're providing or what we're developing is different from other virtual patient applications out there. This is a slide that I put together to try to show how it's different. So a lot of the applications that are out there now, as he said, are sort of cartoony. There are some that have more or less realistic visuals. There are quite a few that have relatively realistic dialogue. Some will say that they have some underlying emotion engine for the characters to guide the character's behavior. But we're taking all that, we're trying to expand it tremendously. So our understanding is that people are a little bit more than emotion and dialogue. And what we want to show here is that there are these many other underlying models, underlying engines, as I call them, to drive the character's behavior. So I have a cognition engine. I'm taking an off-the-shelf product and I'm writing rules to try to drive the character's behavior based on how it's thinking, what it knows about the world, what has changed during the conversation. I do have a dialogue model. The dialogue model is based on, well, so it's two parts to it. There's the capture of a natural language input, speech input from a person, from a user, from a student, and then there's the figuring out what that means when you capture that dialogue. The first part, we're using the IBM Watson system right now, so we can tap into their capability. We can send the file over of what the person has said. It'll spit back out a series of words that say, this is what I captured, this is what I think the person said. And then we take that and we say, okay, well, what does that mean in this context? And what the person said could be different in different contexts. And so we want to make sure that we understand that. That's called dialogue model. We have that. We have other concepts like a social cognition. I'm very interested in thinking about how does a given patient interact with the pharmacist or with the nurse or with a physician, and how do different patients behave differently. So if I have a patient who is younger versus older, who is of one ethnicity versus another, who's rural versus urban, those can all influence the way that somebody behaves in the clinic. And I want to drive the character's behavior based on that background. Other components as well. I don't need to go into all of them, but my point in saying all this is the vision that we have of where we're going with this virtual patient. It's not going to be static in any way whatsoever. The underlying all these engines are a series of rules, and I have right now, I have 5 interns, 5 summer practicum students who are working on these rules, and I'm going to have a couple more helping me out. They're diving into the literature and they're looking at things like, okay, in the obesity literature, what does it say about somebody who has certain characteristics, and how does that affect this person's behavior? How does obesity influence behavior of some sort, or how does diabetes, or how does any kind of disease state? And so we're taking those and we're writing rules, and those are underlying the behaviors of our characters, so that when I load a certain character, a certain case, I know that these set of rules, which are based on literature, are the ones that are going to drive the character's behavior and make it hopefully very realistic. And we'll be doing testing on that, of course, as well. So this is the big picture of where we're going with our virtual patient architecture. This is, you saw this image maybe before in the video. This is a model, as you can see, of somebody. This is really what she looks like. This is a former colleague. She sat in front of a sort of a special rig over at the dental school. We took some pictures. It created a 3D model, a mesh, and then we sent that to an artist, and the artist is creating a 3D character out of her. And it's quite realistic, and that's the realism that we're going for. That's what we care about. We don't want cartoony at all. We want quite realistic. Another component is, as Jerry mentioned, we care about progression. We care about how does a given patient age, or how does disease progress. And so you might see, this is our Simone character. That's not her name, but we're calling the character Simone. So you might see her at age 20 or early 20s. The first case is this case where you see her at early 20s. But she's going to age. The next time you see her as a clinician, she may be 30 years old, and then she's going to be 40 years old, and then she's going to be mid-50s. And she's got to change. Everything about her has to change. All those rules that I talked about a second ago have to be tagged with, well, if you're 30 years old and all these other conditions apply, then behave in this way. If you're 40 years old or 50 years old and all these conditions apply, then behave in a different way. I know for a fact that I can't behave like I did when I was 20 years old, probably for the better, but that's because I've got a little bit of experience, and so everything about me, my behavior, my knowledge, my social knowledge, of course my physiology has all changed, and that has to be modeled in those underlying engines. We're working with a researcher who is at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, who works with a lot of 3-letter agencies to take images and age these images. You may have seen some of his stuff, some of it's public. So he's taken these images, this is just static picture, he's taken it and he can age the character. So this is her about 10 years later. This is her about 20 years later. He just takes that one image, and he's got some algorithms underlying it that show what somebody is going to look like as she ages. So we're taking these algorithms, this capability, and we're putting it towards the underlying mesh, an underlying model that's used in the game engine, so that we can age our characters realistically in the game engine. So that's just a demonstration of where we're going with this, with the characters. We've got a whole bunch of disease states that we care about. There are dozens more, as everybody in this room is certainly aware. We've got lists at UNC, we've got a list of about 90 or so that we consider the primary disease states that we want our students to get, at least initially, and then we introduce another 90 or that many more over the course of the few years there. They don't learn everything, they can't learn everything, but they're learning just about everything. Very complicated cases, and we're building those kinds of complicated cases. So the case that we're most fleshed out is a young woman. She has obesity, a little bit of obesity, she has diabetes. Later in life, she's going to have some dementia. There are some other things that happen. There's some cancer in the family. And so we care about introducing all those characteristics into the patient, into that case, and then driving the dialogue and driving the models of her behavior that are relevant to those disease states. But there are other cases that are in development. As I mentioned, I've got a whole bunch of students who are working with me to look into obesity, to look into diabetes, to look into hyperlipidemia, to look into pregnancy, to look into all these different factors that could influence the way that a pharmacist would practice in his or her clinic. Where are we right now? We've been working on this project for about 9 months or so, maybe a little bit more. We have some high-level help. As Jerry mentioned, we have Dean Bluen, who's been very supportive, and he's put together a team of other pharmacy faculty and of faculty from across the street, from the dental school and from the nursing school. And they're participating to help us develop the cases and to drive the direction of our project. I have another smaller team that's helping me design that first case, and others in the works to develop future cases. So our platform it's in development, but it's functional. And I have a demo on my machine that I can show after the fact to anybody who's interested. It's up and running. We have everything integrated. We have our physiology engine that Jerry showed, the BioGears. We've got an emotion engine. We've got cognition. We've got the dialogue models that are there. They will always be fleshed out. They'll never be done. Someone asked me when the project will be done, and I said, if it's done, if I can give you a certain time, then I'm putting myself out of a job. I don't want to do that. I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing, and so we're just going to continue developing these cases. We have these initial cases, as I said, and we've got a whole bunch of other cases that are in development now. And I think, did you want to go on more about some of the other, how we can help?
So we thought what we do is show this at lunchtime today. We'll fire up the software. If you want to come by, we'll sit in a corner somewhere while you're eating your lunch if you want to see what this actually looks like in its current state. We're not crazy enough to think that we can do this by ourselves, so that's why we're here to reach out. We need help. We need collaborators. We need co-conspirators to help us here. We're reaching out. We have a farm alliance. Rob's getting ready to go to Europe to meet with our partners over there. I'm actually going to Australia next week to meet with folks at Monash University to make sure that this has a global focus and it's not just very xenophobically, focused on North Carolina or the United States. So, we're pretty excited about this. We're thankful for the support that we've gotten from Dr. Eshelman and, of course, our staff faculty and our dean. But we really hope that in putting a lot of work into this, that it's transformative for the larger community. We have 12 staff members working on this at any time. There's normally about 6 or 7 working on this full time. But we need help building out the scenario. We've been focused on the platform and kind of the formula for how this works up to this point. So we have a long kind of multi-year roadmap for where this could go. So that being said, does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about? Okay, there we go.
Could you take this program and look at the patient 5 years later if they didn't take the medication, and look at the patient 5 years later if they did take the medication?
That's the whole goal. That's the whole idea of not only showing the patient in terms of what they look like on the outside, but also what they look like on the inside physiologically. And so as a stretch goal for this, we've had a lot of discussions within the school with their faculty committee about the fact that at some point we could flip this and use it as a patient education tool and be able to actually help to educate the patients on what adherence or not will mean to them 10 years down the road. So, young lady.
Thank you. I have two questions. First of all, this is really cool. I'm a lab person, and my wheels are going crazy with ideas right now, so this is very exciting for me. My first question is, how much opportunity would a course coordinator have to interact with you guys to develop the cases, to say we want very specific things? I want to make sure smoking cessation is in this case, or whatever it is. Do you work closely, or is everything kind of pre-built in?
So the cases that Rob and his team are working on right now are, I would say the term would be canned. They're in the can. They're predetermined. The long-term goal for this is that we have an authoring tool that goes along with it, where instructors can kind of roll their own. We would give them a palette of things to choose from, and they could create variations of the cases that would be different enough to suit their unique educational needs for their students. We're not there yet, and we need to work through some things, because it's one thing if we're creating canned scenarios built to an established protocol or a standard, but when you talk to the university lawyers about letting instructors roll their own and go off on the reservation, they tend to get excited about that. So we're working through that. But you know, the other thing is what we're building right now is a prototype. So just to give you an example, this is a couple of $1 million of effort here, which in the general scheme of things isn't much. And so we're trying to build an engaging experience, but we've got a lot of moving pieces here. This is very complex, and it's really based on the work that Rob and I have done for the DoD. The entertainment games I've worked on, you know, budget $50 million, marketing budget $100 million. One goal, make it fun and maybe sell units, okay? So we're trying to educate people. We're trying to show the usefulness of this, and hopefully it will blossom into other things. So we're aggressively going after all kinds of grants right now to continue to build a roadmap, and that's another reason why we're here, is to find collaborators, partners that maybe have unique interest areas that want to take this in a certain direction where we could work together, and so that's why we're here.
And my other question is, have you put into it the opportunity for interprofessional teamwork? I know you said that you were working towards the multi-user capabilities. Would it be something where, for example, a medical student, a nursing student, a pharmacy student could work virtually together on a case, not being in the same room, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. That's not part of this current version of the project, but Rob and I have worked on those things before, so I actually built one of those for Duke University Medical Center. If you go to 3DI Teams on the web, there's a whole history of an application, and I guess they're still using it at the School of Medicine and the School of Nursing at Duke that I built in about 2007. So this technology tends to lend itself to that, and what we embedded in that particular application was team steps all the way through the UI, and we had master team steps trainers come in, and we actually got it certified at Duke as a mechanism for team steps training. So that's the next logical progression that seems to come up quite frequently. Any other questions? Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So my background is technology, so I really love this, and I love the innovation, so it's great. My question to you is, are you seeing, and I know this is still, excuse me, early in development, but are you seeing students, so I look back at gaming, right, and you have the issue with students spending so much time gaming, and I personally had to stop with games because I never slept if I'm playing games, right? So are you seeing an increase in engagement and interest on the students who are sort of playing with your prototypes, and can we get them to something you mentioned earlier was the opportunity to see more patients this way than what they would see in real life, just because of time. So are you seeing them want to go back and redo and replay and be more engaged with this kind of learning opportunity?
So I guess from my experience, even given the nascent stage of the development of this, we have students beating a path to our door that want to help. And so we have to talk to the faculty and their advisors to make sure that if they want to help, that we're not impeding their other academic success areas. So there's a lot of interest in this. It's a new thing. I think the students are competitive. They'd like to have a mechanism in which they can compete against their peers to show their knowledge and their skill. The other thing that I found, which was kind of surprising, is I get invited to go to a lot of these like hackathons on the weekend, and I'm a judge and things like that. And the pharmacy students show up at these things, which I'm astounded by, and they're competing against computer science majors at like Duke and NC State and things like that. So for the ones that are really in the groove, they seem to have both physical and intellectual energy to spare. And so we hope that this becomes an outlet for them in the construction of these things, and in the feedback that hopefully they can provide to our staff, the development, they will be learning and reinforcing the learning process in terms of, you know, how this really comes together from a physiological, you know, pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic standpoint as well.
The other way to look at this is we're very interested in using the technology intelligently. That's the way I describe it. So this is going to be a game. It's going to be for fun. It's going to be a supplement, let's say, for an OSCE. It's not going to replace that. It's going to be something that the students can go off on their own and practice, but not, and learn and get some engagements that they wouldn't get in their courses. But it needs to be something that they want to use and needs to be engaged. So one of the things that I've been very interested for forever is trying to figure out how to use this in a way that engages the student and doesn't make it just play and just for fun, but there's something real about it. So it's very important. We do have people, the interns who I have working for me right now are not gamers at all, but they were intrigued by the concept of being able to write essentially the artificial intelligence underlying this character's behavior. So they are very interested in this concept, and we're really looking forward to keeping on pushing it forward.
That's great, thank you. And then going back to one of your comments there, are you building something into it so that it can become competitive? That there's some way to build points or compare themselves against other students, or?
So there's a scoring algorithm, and based on this golden path for each one of the current scenarios, students will get assessed a score and be remediated. Because of the magic of the game technology, we also have the ability to record what takes place in two ways. One is we can record video from different pre-selected camera angles within the game world, tag key events, and then play it back for the student. The other thing we can do is take the data that's in the game engine as a loaf of data. So eventually when we get more participants and perhaps a team-based interprofessional education scenario, we can actually go into the perspectives of what different people were looking at and saying and doing at different points of time in a 15 or 20-minute scenario. So there's a number of ways we can do that. And we've done a lot of that with the military already for some of the training that we do with them.
Thank you.
Not every faculty is going to want competition in his or her classroom, and so that's obviously something that we'll be able to build in, whether or not it's something that we show necessarily. But underlying it, as Jerry described, we do have a series of learning objectives, and we match the behaviors of the student against those learning objectives, as in any training simulation, make sure that the appropriate behaviors are done at the right time in the right way.
All right, thank you very much for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate your time.